All right, so let's jump into this blog post. It's called The Role of Media in Shaping Black Perceptions. And it really got me thinking about, how much media really shapes our views, especially when we talk about something as complex as race.
It is fascinating, isn't it? I mean, media doesn't just reflect society, it really kind of actively shapes it. And I think for the Black community, that means that generations have grown up with portrayals that are very often far
Yeah.
from reality.
Yeah, and this post brought up a good point. I said that media is both a mirror and a molder. And that got me thinking about how these portrayals can be insidious. They seep into our subconscious and we don't even realize it. Like, remember those old cartoons with the crows in Dumbo? I mean, as a kid, I thought they were funny, but looking back, yikes.
Yeah, and that's the danger, right? They're seemingly harmless,
Yeah.
but they lay the groundwork for those deeper biases, like a drip, drip, drip effect that shapes perceptions over time.
Yeah, and the post highlighted early cinema as a particularly rough period. I mean, it was basically open season on racist caricatures back then.
Absolutely. You had those deeply demeaning tropes, like the mammy figure and the happy-go-lucky entertainer, designed to reinforce power structures and dehumanize Black individuals.
And it's crazy how long those stereotypes persisted, even after the civil rights movement. I mean, Brown v. Board of Education happened in '54, and yet these harmful images were still around for decades in the media.
It really shows how media often lags behind societal progress. I mean, those deeply ingrained narratives are tough to shake, even when the world around them is changing.
That's true. Think about it, shows like The Jeffersons and Sanford and Son. They came along in the '70s, and they did bring Black families into mainstream living rooms, which is a big deal, but
Yeah, but they still relied heavily on, those familiar, sometimes problematic comedic formulas. The wily con man or the sassy matriarch, figures that could be entertaining on the surface, but also perpetuated limiting
it
stereotypes.
feels like a constant push and pull.
Exactly. Two steps forward, one step back. And then The Cosby Show hit in the 80s, and it felt like a genuine breakthrough. You had successful, loving Black family, shattering so many prevailing stereotypes of the time.
That show was a phenomenon. Everyone I knew was watching it.
And what's interesting? The Cosby Show wasn't just impactful for white audiences, but it also had a profound effect on how Black people saw themselves represented on screen. That positive, aspirational portrayal had a ripple effect on self-perception and identity.
That's a really good point. But even with those strides, this post argues that harmful stereotypes haven't disappeared. It's like they morph and adapt, and they become more subtle and insidious.
Yeah, like take the criminal stereotype, the Post points out, how news coverage often overrepresents Black individuals in crime stories, feeding into that narrative and having a real-world impact on things like racial profiling.
And it makes you wonder, is it even possible to escape these stereotypes when they're so deeply ingrained in the fabric of our media?
That's the million-dollar question. But the Post does highlight some reasons for optimism. I mean, in recent years, we've seen a real shift towards more nuanced and multifaceted portrayals.
Oh, absolutely. Like Queen from last year was such a breath of fresh air, funny, insightful, celebrated Black culture without resorting to tired tropes.
And what's even more encouraging is the rise of Black creators behind the camera. More Black directors, writers, producers. That's what really drives authentic storytelling.
And speaking of driving change, we can't forget the impact of social media. It's like a double-edged sword, right? On the one hand, it gives a voice to marginalized communities, but it can also be an echo chamber for negativity and misinformation.
Yeah, that's the challenge. Navigating this new media landscape requires a whole new set of skills. We need to be discerning about the content we consume, who's creating it, and what their agenda might be.
So it sounds like media literacy is more important now than ever.
Without a doubt. We need to equip ourselves with the tools to analyze media critically, to understand its power, and to use it as a force for positive change.
So we've talked about the power of media and how it's shaped perceptions of Black individuals over time, and how those representations have evolved. But what really struck me in this blog post, the role of media in shaping Black perceptions, is the emphasis on media literacy.
It's not just about being passive consumers anymore. We have to be active participants, critically evaluating what we're seeing and reading and hearing.
It's true. It feels like we're drowning in information these days. Everywhere you turn, there's a screen, flashing images, headlines, opinions. How do we even begin to filter all that?
Well, that's where media literacy comes in. It's like having a toolkit for dissecting those media messages. You start by asking those critical questions. Who created this? What's their agenda? What techniques are they using to persuade me?
Right. And the post gave this great example of how framing can completely change the narrative. like showing a protest and focusing only on property damage, versus highlighting the peaceful demonstrators
Yeah.
and the reasons behind their actions.
Exactly. It's about being aware of those subtle biases, those choices about what to show and what to leave out.
Yeah, and it's not just about traditional media anymore. Social media has become this breeding ground for misinformation and echo chambers. It's scary how easily people can get swept up in a narrative without even questioning the source.
That's why source verification is so crucial. Is this information coming from a reputable news organization,
Hmm.
a respected academic,
Yeah.
or just some random person with an agenda? We have to be detectives,
Hmm.
following those digital breadcrumbs back to the source.
It's like that game we used to play as kids' telephone. By the time the message gets to the end of the line, it's completely distorted. Except in this case, the stakes are a lot higher.
A lot higher. And remember, even when you're dealing with credible sources, there's always going to be an element of perspective. Every story has multiple sides.
So it's about getting out of our own echo chambers, right?
Yeah.
Actively seeking out diverse viewpoints
Mhm.
and challenging our own assumptions.
It's easy to surround yourself with people who agree with you. But that doesn't actually expand your understanding of the world. It's those uncomfortable conversations, those moments when you're forced to confront a different perspective that really make you think.
Yeah, and that's what's so great about documentaries like Summer of Soul. It shines a light on a piece of history that was largely forgotten, offering a new perspective on Black culture and the events of the 60s.
And it highlights the importance of seeking out those untold stories, those voices that have been historically marginalized or silenced.
It's not just about being a critical consumer, though, is it? The Post also emphasized the importance of supporting creators
Mhm.
who are pushing for more nuanced and authentic portrayals.
Absolutely. We need to put our money where our mouth is. Support Black filmmakers, writers, artists, journalists, anyone who's challenging the status quo, and creating work that resonates with you.
So concretely, what can we do? Besides watching shows like Atlanta or movies like Black Panther, which are fantastic, are there other ways to support those diverse voices?
Think about your media habits. Where do you get your news? What books are on your shelf? Whose podcasts are you listening to? Make a conscious effort to diversify those sources.
And don't underestimate the power of word of mouth. If you discover a book or a film that you love, share it with your friends, leave a review online, spread the word.
It's those small actions, those individual choices, that collectively contribute to a more inclusive and equitable media landscape.
This conversation has been a real eye-opener for me. It's made me realize how much unconscious bias I've internalized over the years, just from passively consuming media.
We all have those blind spots. It's about acknowledging them, being willing to learn,
Yeah,
and constantly challenging our own perceptions.
I think this blog post has given me a whole new set of tools to navigate the media world. It's not just about entertainment anymore. It's about actively shaping the world we want to live in. It's easy to get kind of bogged down in all the negativity, especially when we're talking about something like race and media representation. But honestly, exploring this blog post, the role of media in shaping Black perceptions, has actually left me feeling pretty hopeful about the future.
I'm with you there. There's definitely a shift happening, a real momentum building towards more authentic and inclusive storytelling.
The post pointed to some encouraging trends, like the rise of diverse leadership in media companies, having more Black individuals in those positions of power, making decisions about what stories get told. That feels huge.
Think about it for decades. The gatekeepers of storytelling have been predominantly white, shaping narratives from a very limited perspective. Now, with more Black executives, producers, directors, writers, we're seeing a much wider range of experiences reflected on screen.
And it's not just about checking boxes right. It's got to be genuine representation, stories that feel nuanced and authentic, not those tired tropes.
Exactly. And that's where the demand for authenticity comes in. Audiences are savvy. They can smell a phony portrayal a mile away. They're demanding stories that resonate with their lived experiences, stories that challenge the status quo, stories that reflect the complexities of the world we live in.
And that demand is creating opportunities for a whole new generation of Black creators.
Absolutely. We're seeing Black filmmakers, writers, artists, podcasters, YouTubers. They're building their own platforms, creating their own content, connecting with audiences directly, bypassing those traditional gatekeepers.
It's like a whole new ecosystem of storytelling is emerging. It's really exciting to witness. But let's be real, systemic barriers still exist. It's not like everything is magically fixed, just because we're seeing some positive trends.
You're right. We can't get complacent. There's still so much work to be done to make sure that Black representation is truly equitable, that opportunities are available for everyone, Regardless of their background or zip code, we need to dismantle those systems of oppression that have historically limited access and opportunity.
So it's not enough to just watch Black Panther and call it a day. We have to be active participants in this evolution, pushing for change, demanding better. What are some things we can actually do?
Well, think about where you spend your money and attention. Support Black-owned businesses. Subscribe to Black-owned publications. Donate to organizations that are fighting for racial justice.
And be mindful of your media consumption. Seek out diverse voices. Amplify those perspectives. Challenge people who are perpetuating those harmful stereotypes.
It's about using our platforms, however big or small, to speak out against injustice and advocate for change.
You know, at the beginning of this deep dive, we talked about how media can be both a mirror and a molder. And I really think we have the power to reshape that mirror, to reflect a world that's more just, more equitable, and more representative of the diversity of human experience.
It's not going to happen overnight, but I believe it's possible. And it starts with each of us, making those conscious choices, have those tough conversations, and using our voices to demand better.
This has been such a powerful conversation. It's really made me think critically about my own media consumption and how I can be a more intentional and informed participant in this ongoing evolution.
And that's what we're hoping for with these deep dives, to spark those aha moments, challenge assumptions, and to inspire action, however small.
To all our listeners out there, thank you for joining us. We hope that you'll continue to explore these issues, engage in those critical conversations, and use your voices to create a more inclusive and equitable world, both on screen and off.
Keep questioning, keep learning, and keep pushing for progress. That's how we create real and lasting change.
Thanks for listening, and we'll see you back here soon for another deep dive.